David Bluesy here with another 3 for All, and this is 3 Robben Ford Licks from 2004. And Robben Ford is a very talented and expressive, blues, rock, and jazz guitarist that's been on the scene since the 1970s. And I've definitely been following him, when he kind of popped up in guitar magazines and I heard players talk about him. And when I first heard him play, it was just a striking contrast to a lot of the blues and rock, musicians that I'd listened to. And he had elements of jazz and some kind of fusion, ideas mixed in with these kind of stock blues and rock licks, and I really, enjoyed his style. And he was named one of the greatest guitarists of the 20th century by Musician magazine. So he's definitely a very respected and dynamic, musician, and he's been on the scene for a long time. A lot of fans of Robben Ford, they realize, he played with Miles Davis, the Yellowjackets, people like Larry Carlton, Joni Mitchell. But then he also played on Working Class Dog by Rick Springfield, the album with Jesse's Girl. And he also played on Creatures of the Night and Songs of the Elder with Kiss. And I always thought that was so strange. Creatures of the Night actually have Robben Ford and Neil Giraldo from, Pat Benatar's band. Kind of secretly did, guitar sessions and solos on that album. And I always thought that was so interesting. Like, wait, Robben Ford and Neil Giraldo are on Creatures of the Night? I had no idea. Robben also has released a lot of instructional material in the late 80s and kind of the early to mid 90s. He released, a batch of REH instructional videos. And I think there's 4 of them, and those are great, videos if you're looking to branch out and kind of acquire, some different strategies for blues and rock and jazz. There's some great material there, and then he's definitely been featured in guitar magazines for years. Guitar Player. He also popped up a lot, in Guitar One. I think I remember seeing some, lessons with him in Guitar One magazine back in the day. So he's definitely very intelligent and very, smart as far as, a musician. But then he has all this kind of gritty feel and just this dynamic, approach to the guitar where he pulls out all these different ideas that are not common, but they just sound so good. Great feel, great tone, great phrasing, phenomenal guitar player. The licks from this lesson actually come from a live performance from 2004, and it was I think it was some kind of brewing company in California, and they did a performance. I think it was broadcast on PBS, on the West Coast. And they're playing a song called Lovin Cup, and that's actually an old Paul Butterfield song. And Robben, has recorded this a few times. It's actually on his Supernatural album, I believe. And then there's also an acoustic version of it on kind of an acoustic, EP that came out with Robben Ford. And you can definitely go back and you can find, I think there's kind of like an extended sessions album with Paul Butterfield, and the song pops up. But Lovin Cup's really cool. It's got this cool kind of sneaky groove, and then Robben is just, jamming over the top of it. The first lick is this kind of crafty, open position, blues lick, and he's doing a reverse rake in there too, which is really cool. And you hear all this kind of handling noise and expression, when he's playing. Something like this. And it's kind of funky, and it's, it's very quirky as far as the rhythm. And if you hear it in time, you can actually kind of hear how it falls into place, in the rhythm. And he kind of just keeps vamping on that, in the beginning. But it's starting there, in open position, E minor pentatonic. And right there, it starts with those open string hammer-ons. And right there, that's tricky. That's the reverse rake, where you're going to slide, A into G there on the 2nd to 4th fret on the G string. And then you're going to craftily kind of mute and rake backwards, hitting the high E string, the D note there on the 3rd fret on the B, and then return to that B on the 4th fret on the G, and then slide back down to that A. Something like second half, very strange and unusual, but I love that phrasing. It's really cool. The next lick is this really tasteful kind of bluesy, phrase. And the first lick, was kind of built out of the open position, shape 1 of E minor pentatonic. And you can think of this as kind of coming out of shape 2 of E minor pentatonic right there. And it's just crafty the way he put this together. So it kind of has a first half, and then the second half answers it, which is kind of the epitome of a great blues lick, or blues phrasing, that kind of question and answer back and forth. So the first part, the question is this, and then the answer, something like that. And I love phrases like that, where you're kind of blurring, the line between the notes, and you hear a little bit of the phrase and then a continuation of the phrase. But you've got this in the beginning, and there he's actually grabbing that flat 5 as a hammer-on pull-off. And then he's going to grab this G note and bend it to G sharp. And then you're going to come back. Something like that. Alright, the next lick actually moves to the next position of E minor pentatonic, so now we're flirting with shape 3 of E minor pentatonic. And it's this gradual kind of race through the scale, and I really do like phrases like this. So at tempo, it's something like this. And then slower, you can actually kind of hear how he pieces that together. And then you're going to go all the way up and down. Something like that. It's a really cool, kind of challenge for your fretting hand and picking hand too. And you can create variations of that, with other positions in minor pentatonic or even other scales as well. Here's a bonus lick from this live footage, and this is this really interesting double stop based idea, kind of at the end of, one of his leads in the song. And, most people, when they think of, using double stops in a solo, they tend to rely more on like a Chuck Berry kind of lick, on higher strings, somewhere on the fretboard, usually with some bending or something like that. But this is really interesting because he's targeting the chord progression, which once again is just a 1-4-5 and E. But he's targeting the chord progression and created this double stop idea that's really, really interesting. Something like this. And there's a couple, spots in there where your ear might tell you, hey, that sounds strange or out of tune. But if, if you hear it by itself like that on the guitar, you don't really hear the changes. But when you hear it with the band and you hear the chord progression kind of move, you can see what he did and why he did it. Because it starts and he's targeting the 5 chord, B7. So he's kind of moving into that little piece of B7 right there. And then he starts targeting the 3rd, the 4th, the flat 5, and the 5. And then right here, he's grabbing an E and a G. And that might sound out of tune, compared to all the B7 stuff that we just did. Because the very next one is that. Now, related to B7, that does sound ugly. But you have to think, we just moved to the 4 chord, so that's actually over A7. And that's your 5th and your flat 7 right there, so it fits. It just, you have to make sure you hear that A behind you. So right there it starts the A, and then you're going to move to this, which there's your root and your third. And then right there you're going to slide into E to end that phrase. So it's really crafty and very, kind of thought out as far as where he's moving to and when and why he's moving there, because the chord's changing. And I just like that phrase, it's kind of obnoxious and unusual, but that's why I like it, because it's not the same old, kind of Chuck Berry double stop lick. It's kind of navigating those double stops and implied chords in a very intelligent way. That's going to wrap this look at 3 Robben Ford licks from 2004. And Robben is definitely a very exciting and unusual and intelligent and dynamic and expressive player, because he's always shown, this melodic tendency and, plays very melodic, but then he also plays these very unusual and kind of, just gritty blues ideas, and he sprinkles jazz and rock and a lot of different things into his music. So depending on what era of Robben Ford you're listening to, you might hear more traditional blues, or you might hear full-on fusion and jazz, or maybe more of a rock, kind of a dirty rock tone. And there's just something you can really pick up from noticing a player like that, where he's not just playing your same old, minor pentatonic blues licks. He's mixing all these different worlds together, almost like an artist would mix paint, but he's mixing blues and rock and jazz together in a very, forward-thinking and modern way. So anyway, leave some feedback and some comments. Please subscribe to Late Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content material. Thank you.